Thanks for listening to FYI Stillwater, where you will hear information about your local government you didn't know you need to know, straight from the source. Be sure to check out other news and information from the City of Stillwater at stillwater.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter. Hi, I'm your host, Sherry Fletcher, Director of Marketing and Civic Engagement. Today, my co-host is Assistant City Manager Paula Dennison. How are you doing today, Paula?
Great to be inside in the cool. How are you today?
Kind of the same way. It's been really hot.
Yeah, it has. Today's a little more windy, so it doesn't make it as bad out there.
Yeah, I went for 2 walks on Saturday, and I had to take all day Sunday to recover because I was so dehydrated.
It drains you, and my muscles don't work as well when it's as hot as it has been when I do my rounds either.
So who's our guest today, Paula?
Today, we have the Stillwater Chief of Police, Jeff Watts, with us as our guest today, and he has been quite busy in the last couple of weeks.
It's been a lot of, it's been a kind of a weird time in general, but the pandemic kind of got kicked off the front pages with the George Floyd arrest and the subsequent protest, and the topic kind of keeps continuing, and it's a conversation that's not ended yet. So it'd be really great to have some insight from the Chief of Police.
Yes, yeah, it will, and he can definitely give it to us, I'm sure. I do have a couple of basic facts from our PD Facebook page.
Share some basic facts, Paula.
I would love to. So the first is the handle is @Stillwater Police, which if you do not like it or follow it, then you're outnumbered because we have over 18,000 people that like the @Stillwater Police Facebook page.
And it's a fun site. I mean, there's a lot of good information, but there's also some sassy information, like National Donut Day was donuts on a barbell.
The donuts were the weights, weren't they?
They had been working up for it all year. It was cute. I really liked it.
Another one, the post on June 1st was a message from Jeff, our guest today, the Chief of Police, about the upcoming Black Lives Matter protest. That one post reached more than 52,000 people, and more than 23,000 people reacted overwhelmingly positive by liking or sharing it.
Yeah, that was a big number. So it was a topic that people really are interested in. Well, welcome, Jeff. You were a return guest. You've been here before. I remember last time we talked about your ponytail. I think that's...
Yes. Thank you for having me back. Yes, last time we talked about the rat tail.
Yeah, you were supposed to bring me a picture, and I don't think I've seen it yet.
Yes, probably for good cause. That's something you can't unsee.
You can't unsee. Awesome. Well, you know how we began it. We're going to do a lightning round, and we're going to ask you some random but revealing questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so you've kind of given this away. You must have cheated and looked at my list. Jeff, are you a good dancer?
Oh, Lord, no. It would be one of those things, again, you could not unsee. You don't want to see me on the dance floor, I can assure you of that.
Well, you know, there's just a few of us in here you could demonstrate for us how
it's not video.
Poorly you dance.
Yeah, it's not video.
Oh. I'm afraid the squeals and the screaming and the running like your hair was on fire would be a giveaway.
Okay, so we've established she's not a good dancer, but I'm not really convinced.
No, me either.
Yeah.
Okay, next. What is your best scar story?
Ooh, that could be a good one.
Oh, wow. So when I was probably a young teenager, maybe 13, my sister and I were out riding bikes, and she crashed, and I was laughing at her, and while I was laughing at her, the chain came off of my bike, and I flipped it and scarred my knee pretty good. So it was payback for me picking on my little sister.
That is... way it ends up working out.
And most scar stories, they're siblings anyway.
Yeah.
Just about everyone I've ever heard. I got one more for you if you're ready. And this was not on Sherry's list.
Uh-oh, here we go.
All right. What is your favorite lake activity?
Oh, I love to just sit on the sandy beaches of Keystone Lake and just watch the boats go by and watch the kids play in the water.
Is that your downtime?
That is my downtime.
When was the last time you got to do that?
Saturday, while you all were enduring the heat that you were just talking about,
Yeah, it was pretty
I
hot.
was enjoying the lake and a shade and watching my kids play in the water.
You could have picked me up on the way down the road.
I know, but I
You
like to
could have
just
done
hang
it.
out on the lake and watch the kids. And most people want to go boating and move around, and I like to that's my lazy time.
Yeah, it's kind of mine too. I could do that too. So,
Well, it's good to have it, though.
Yeah.
You've got to have some downtime.
especially in the atmosphere we're in now, like we've
Yes.
been, pushing our way through this pandemic. And then we had this incident in Minnesota with the George Floyd arrest. It's been in all of the news. It's really affecting. At first, it was larger cities were protesting, and it really did trickle down to the smaller cities, including Stillwater. Can we? Jeff, could you maybe give us some thoughts on your perspective of that arrest and what your thoughts are there and what we need to take away from that?
Well, I think like 99.9% of U.S. law enforcement, when we watched that arrest, we were just as offended, horrified, appalled as every other American. That is not how we treat anyone we come into contact with, whether they're a citizen or not. It doesn't matter. We treat everyone the same, fairly and equally. But, we all took an oath, and the badge to us is more than just a piece of metal on our chest. It's a symbol. It's a symbol of trust. It's a symbol of protecting and serving our communities, and it's a symbol that we all hold very dear to our hearts. And to see someone violate that trust and violate that symbol of what we represent, it's really, really hard. And it's been hard on every officer who comes to work every day and does the right thing and takes care of people, to see someone abuse that authority and literally take a man's life.
Because it was very hard to look at. But then you start seeing all the posts. It's like, oh, well, that's a legitimate way to arrest somebody. That's a legitimate hold position. So, it was a lot of stuff that I was kind of curious about. Is that something that is on the books that you can do?
Well, it all depends on the situation. There's a lot of talk out there about use of force continuums, and, if the person you're in contact with does A, you do B, they do B, you do C, and it's never quite that simple. Anybody who's been in a street brawl or has fought for their life knows that there are things that occur that aren't on the books, that aren't taught in a classroom, because you cannot what if every scenario. If a situation calls for deadly force, the first thing a person thinks of is the officer using his gun. But deadly force is any deadly force. If your life is in imminent danger of death and you decide to use your car to protect you, or whatever you can get your hands on, deadly force is deadly force. And, when it comes to use of force, if you're fighting somebody and you're down on the ground and you're fighting for your life, you may hit them in some place you were never taught to hit them, but that is part of the event. So we don't teach to put your knee and smash someone's neck, but in the heat of the moment, in the battle, so to speak, it could happen. But once things are under control, there's no need to continue that use of force. You de-escalate appropriate with the situation. Once someone starts to comply, then you de-escalate your use of force to meet that compliance, so that you only use the force necessary to control the situation. And what we saw in George Floyd's arrest was a completely de-escalated situation. However, you still had an officer who kept his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck for almost 9 minutes, and so there was absolutely no call for that.
Yeah, it was hard to watch. It was seriously hard to watch. But it has resulted in a lot of conversation as well about, the Black Lives Matter movement has really taken off. There's been a lot of protests throughout the country.
Last week, we even had a protest here in front of City Hall, specifically in front of the police department, from the Black Lives Matter group, and it was a very peaceful protest. And Jeff, if you would like to elaborate some on that protest itself and what all we were able to accomplish together with the protesters.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought things just could not have went any better. There was a lot of passionate speakers, a very engaged crowd, and we were all there for the same common goal. We were all there to ensure that we start some of these conversations that seem to have been lost over the last few years. As we kind of started this year, the coronavirus showed up and kind of sidetracked everybody, but I think this event kind of brought us back to some of the more important things we need to focus on, which are these concerns that there is unfair treatment of certain members of our community. Late in 2019, we had another event where there was concerns that the Hispanic community was being targeted, and we opened up our lines of communication during that event and tried to reach out to the community, and we offered opportunities for members of the Hispanic community to meet with leaders to talk about their concerns, and things just kind of lost their speed. But this kind of reminded us of the importance of continuing those conversations. And Emily Croft, who was kind of the spearhead of getting this event up and running, we met with her prior to the protest, and it was a really positive conversation. And what we took away from that was we all have the same desires, is to ensure that our community knows that we're here to take care of them, to treat them fairly, no matter the color of their skin, their ethnicity, where they're from. It doesn't matter. We want them all to feel that they are just as important as the person next to them. And, I think this protest, one of the things that I was most impressed about was just our citizens. You had a lot of professional protesters, is what I'll call them, who come in from out of town. I talked to several that had traveled more than 4 hours just to be here for the protest. But our local citizens showed up, and they showed up with an open heart to listen to what's going on, so that they were more aware of the concerns of the community and kind of, taking that initial step to make changes in themselves as well.
I think the thing that I took away from it was actually when you were talking, Jeff, when you were talking about, if you don't feel comfortable coming and talking to an officer, go to a church or go to those other organizations that you've got a relationship with, that if you trust the reverend or somebody, then you have, I guess, a better feeling to share what you're thinking, perhaps.
Yeah, we want our folks, our community members, to feel comfortable coming in and talking to us, but we understand that sometimes it can be intimidating going to a police department where you feel like maybe you were treated unfairly. And so I encouraged, our community members to reach out to a community leader. Everyone knows a community leader, whether it's there at their church or at their baseball team or any type of sporting event or any type of specialty that our citizens are involved in. They know a leader or someone who can be their voice if they are not strong enough or not ready to come forward to the police department. And we try to make it as inviting as possible. I will say that since the conversation that we had during the protest of how open our doors are and how willing we are to work with our citizens, I've had a lot of folks reach out to me. And it's been very positive interaction, and I look forward to where we go from here.
And I think that's one of the things about Stillwater that is so unique to this community. We're small enough yet large enough to have protest, but during the protest, we know whether it's police department and community leaders or ministerial association and alliance or, any of those.
And they were all out there.
They were all out there, and there's so many relationships already established that it's not oh, I'm going to throw you out on a limb, Ministerial Association. Even though I don't know you, I'm going to call out you as a resource
Right.
in case somebody's not comfortable enough coming to the PD. This community has really stepped up and developed those relationships up and down, cross, just all over the place.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, that's really what it just really resonated with me, because if you don't feel comfortable going to the police and you have a need, what can you do? And this was an alternative that maybe some people might not think about. So anyway, I thought that was really powerful. So for the rank and file officers, how does a situation like this, how does it resonate with them? Is it something that they? So what I want to know, Jeff, is how does this affected the regular officers, the rank and file?
I think it adds a level of stress beyond the daily stress they encounter. I don't think the average citizen sometimes realizes the amount of stress the officer carries around with them, whether it's a traffic stop or a shoplifting call or just stopping to get a Coke. That officer's a target, and he or she can be placed in a life or death situation in a matter of seconds. When you add in the concerns that there's a lot of individuals in our society who look at the officer as part of a systemic racism problem, that makes them a bigger target. That makes it easier to devalue that officer as a human and just see them as a agent of the government or a person of oppression, and it is not the case. So the officer is much more aware of what's going on around them, and I believe it makes them much less likely to engage certain members of the community for fear of how that will be viewed by somebody who's videotaping them with a cell phone or trying to aggravate the situation. And so it does create a lot of tension that wasn't there before or had subsided and now has flourished again. The officers of the Stillwater Police Department, they have some of the highest ethics of any individuals I've ever worked with. They love this community, the color of your skin, where you're from, what you do, what your religion is, your sexual orientation. All they care about is taking care of you. And when that comes into question and everyone is, not everyone, but a lot of members of our society are putting them under a microscope, it does make them kind of pull back and think, wow, even just simply stopping to talk to somebody, to check on them, can be totally twisted and blown out of proportion. So they can have the best of intentions, but what somebody posts on social media can be so twisted that it causes them to have a lot of anxiety and stress that they weren't dealing with before, and frankly, it's really unfair to them.
So it's a movement that we do need to talk about. I think as a city, you start making sure that you're looking at policies that maybe you didn't think about previously. That is it affecting people of color in a different way that maybe you've not looked at?
I heard him in conversations with the young lady that organized the protest talk about how selective the Stillwater Police Department is in the folks that they hire. So, Jeff, could you elaborate just a little?
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at our hiring process and think, they're just filling spots. The first guy or gal that comes in that meets the minimum requirements, we're going to hire them and put them out on the street with little to no training and expect them to provide the most professional police services available to our community, and that is, nothing could be further from the truth. Our selection process I would say, is one of the most rigorous selection processes you will find at any law enforcement agency in the United States. A great example of that is during our last hiring process, we had 6 openings. We had almost 140 candidates that were selected to test. That's not the number of applications we received. It was far more than that. But we selected 140 of the top candidates to start the testing process. And at the end of the day, we gave a conditional offer to 5 people. So we took that 140 down to 5, and of those 5, we only selected 4. So we are that selective. Our training process is 17 weeks of in-house training that covers everything from defensive tactics, laws that we work under, the policies and procedures that we work under. We cover such a broad range of topics in our in-house program, and that's a 17-week in-depth program of everything from de-escalation to racial profiling to policies and procedures and following the law and ethics and physical fitness. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. If the new officer hasn't been to the CLEAT training, which is the Basic Law Enforcement Academy for Oklahoma, that's another 15 weeks of intensive training they receive. Then they come back here for a 17-week field training program where they are with a senior trainer who evaluates everything they do every day for 17 weeks. They are under another microscope to ensure that they treat the public fair, to make sure that they understand the ordinances and the laws, that they understand where they're going, that their driving behaviors are correct. So the whole process from the time we hire someone till the time they become a solo officer is almost a year. And that whole entire time, they're being evaluated every day. And then they're on probation for a full 18 months. So if that officer is not meeting our rigorous standards, then they can be dismissed because we only want the top performers. We only want the folks that are going to represent the city as professionals out there representing the Stillwater Police Department and the city of Stillwater.
And Sherry, the reason I ask that is because all of the national news here lately about some considerations to defund police departments and other very extreme actions to be taken. So I thought that would be a good explanation of, you can talk have all these conversations, but here's the facts about Stillwater, Oklahoma, because Stillwater, Oklahoma is very unique in many of the things we do and how we are. So that was a good piece of information for Jeff to provide to us.
Yeah, because there is a lot of conversation of taking very drastic steps just in society as a whole.
Right.
And these conversations do need to be had, but
get all your facts.
Overcorrecting, may not be. We really need to look at what we're doing. So, anyway, I think was really interesting, Jeff, and I would like to also invite you back and maybe bring an officer with you the next time, and we can continue this conversation.
Yeah, I think that would be great. If you look around our police department, you will see that we're a very diverse culture ourselves, and so I think it would be good to hear different perspectives from the officers. The one thing I'll add before we kind of close up is Sir Robert Peel, who is considered the father of law enforcement, kind of developed our founding principles in 1829. And one of those founding principles was, community trust. And I think we've done a great job here of developing that. We have a lot of support from our community. But when we start talking about defunding the police or disbanding the police, Sir Robert Peel put it best when he said that police exist so that we don't have to have a military occupation for law and order. And I think that's something that we've lost sight of as a society. If you defund the police or you remove the police, you now have to have some type of law and order, and it's either vigilante justice or military occupation. Those are your two options.
Yeah, that is something to think about for sure. And it is interesting that that is like the conversations that are being had right now, So, yes, lots to think about. So, yes, we are definitely going to have you back, and we'll bring an officer or two with you the next time. So thank you so much, Jeff, and hope you get to spend a little more time at the lake.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Before we go, let's take a look at the mailbox. The city receives questions in a lot of ways, including emails, social media, even phone calls. So our first question in the mailbox is from Jordan. She asked this on Facebook Messenger. Does the city require permits for garage sales, and are there any regulations about where I can put the garage sale signs? Paula, this is a really good question. We get asked quite a bit.
We do quite a bit, especially this time of year. Permits are not required for garage sales, so that's an easy.
Okay.
Signs, you do need permits for them depending on the size, but the small yard signs, with the permission of the owner of the property that you're going to put the sign in, you can put the sign there. But if you put it there and do not get their permission, they have the right to remove it. Second part of that, do not put signs along the highway on state highways, which is 177 and Highway 51. So
that's
you got
6th Street and
6th
Perkins
Street,
Road.
Perkins Road, and then you got that little bit of Richmond Road from Perkins over to Washington by Lakeview Golf Course, Lakeside, and then north on North Washington, Boomer. It's got a number of
So if people are putting,
names.
like stapling their garage sale signs at the intersection of 6th and Perkins, it's just going to get removed.
It is going to get removed, yes, and will not be returned to you. So don't waste your money or your time or your energy on putting it up there. Find not on a highway and on somebody's private property and get their permission.
All right, that's good advice. Second question today, Jeannie asked about the city pool and splash pad openings. So we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and there's still emergency proclamations and state regulations. And what do you know on this, Paula?
The city pool is going to remain closed this year. It is run and managed by the YMCA, but they have agreed with us to keep it closed this year. The splash pads, they are open. We are reevaluating those in case there's a rebound or a surge in the virus. We're going to have to take another look at it. But for right now, the splash pads are open. We just encourage everybody to maintain as much social distancing as you possibly can at the splash pads.
Especially when your toddlers are running around.
Yes, touching everything.
Right. Well, I'm glad the splash pad's open because I walk out at Boomer, and sometimes just walking through that mist is all I need in this heat.
Yeah, well, good for you for walking out at Boomer.
Yeah, me and everyone else.
Yeah.
It's a busy park.
Yeah,
Social
maintain your
distancing.
social distance.
Absolutely.
Wash your hands after you touch everything.
Right. Bring your own hand sanitizer. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a lovely walk, and
It is very nice.
a lot of people are out there.
It's really nice to see folks getting out again.
Yeah, it is. So that's our podcast today. Thank you for listening to FYI Stillwater. If you like this episode, please give us a like or a comment and share it with your friends.
And stay tuned for our next podcast.
If you have a question for City Hall, email news@stillwater.org, and in the next podcast, we'll answer a few of them. FYI Stillwater is available on our website at stillwater.org, Spotify, and just about anywhere else you enjoy your podcast.